Can you believe all these selfies that the Heather lady gave to Ashley Banfield? I mean, my goodness. Bryan was quite the selfie taker. I've been trying to figure out where he was there. I think it might have been Spokane. Not sure. I just wanted to see if he was near the Mad Greek. Or what restaurant. And what's with all the bathroom selfies? Was he really feeling himself? We're about to go over that entire ABC 2020 documentary. I filmed it, like, I swear, on Saturday. It took me forever. And him holding up those codes and his name, the people on Reddit seem to think it could be related to certain websites. I guess you have to kind of prove you're a human and the date, and maybe that's what that's about. You know what I mean? Certain naughty websites, perhaps. But I guess he went to a ball game somewhere, and he just loved taking selfies, apparently. Some of them look better than others. Some of them look really creepy. He's giving himself lots of thumbs up. Maybe he was proud of himself by accomplishing a certain hike or what have you. Apparently, he liked wearing blue, and he's in the shadows, and he's in front of the mountains, and maybe he's really self-satisfied. Maybe he's really insecure. But things do take a dark turn, of course, after that pivotal November 13th, 2022 day, after Bryan examines his haircut and his making a fist, and he loves wearing his headphones, but then things turn sinister with this guy after he's quote-unquote accomplished what he's accomplished. He loves being in the bathroom. He loves, I guess, looking at himself. Apparently he loves making crazy faces too. But anyway, coming up, you will see me on camera talking about Bethany's interview. We're going to talk about every new thing learned with that ABC 2020 from all the officials no longer under a gag order. And we're not going to see all these selfies, but we will see some. And I'm grateful now we know where these selfies came from. They came from the digital expert lady, and that's what I suspected, but I didn't want to blame anyone for anything. So listen up to everything I learned about Kohberger coming up. Alrighty, I was thinking of calling this video the bonfire of Bryan's vanities. You guys might remember the bonfire of the vanities.
Sherman.
Yes, Maria?
Where are all the white people?
That's what came to mind when I was watching this great ABC 2020 last night. The show was called Idaho Justice. Bryan Kohberger, supposedly, they showed a lot of his selfies just released by authorities in season 48. Wow, they've been on a long time. 48. Episode 1 is a really great show. We learned a lot. I want to chat about everything we learned. I've watched that twice. And I want to talk a little bit about Bethany Funk or Funke. I've heard her name pronounced different ways. Her interview, November 13th, 2022. Oh, and don't worry, a lot of people were saying, oh my goodness, I can't believe they didn't ask Bethany this or that. Well, there's a second interview coming with Captain Blaker, the same guy, audio interview. So I remember I paid for that yesterday, so that should be on the way too with Bethany. I hope the audio is a lot better. I hope it's longer, so we'll see. But this Idaho Justice 2020 Bryan Kohberger, whoa, they changed up those selfies, didn't they? They no longer say Latah County Prosecutor's Office because we went over. Latah said, look, we didn't give those to the American Broadcasting Company. So I have a feeling of where they might have gotten them, but of course I won't speculate. But I'm glad stuff is getting out. There's been some excellent interviews with Stacy Chapin, you know, all the people over at CrimeCon this weekend talking about this gag order, how it did not help and it created this huge vacuum. One of the women featured in this ABC 2020 show, you know, she's at CrimeCon and she was talking about there's so many things she could have confirmed. Like, you know, we knew Bryan Kohberger's DNA was found on the knife sheath. Well, it wasn't like little bits, trace DNA and all this stuff. She was saying how, oh my goodness, we'll find out from 2020, it was 500 times more DNA than they generally get in the low quantity DNA cases. Bryan left a lot of his DNA there, so we did learn a lot. But boy, these selfies, we'll get into them in a second, but I was like, whoa, okay. It didn't come from the Latah County Prosecutor's Office. That's the previous attribution we saw in the promo videos. Well, ABC switched that up last night, didn't they, quickly? I'm sorry for any video editors who had to go through and edit that stuff real quickly and before it aired last night, because they did not have any attributions on any of Bryan Kohberger's selfie photos. In that 2020 last night, 2-hour, great, very well done program, we learned new stuff, new exclusive interviews with family and friends of the victims in the Idaho College murder case, including never before seen selfie photos of Bryan Kohberger. So they no longer attributed those photos to anyone. Latah County was like, we didn't give them to you. We did not give them to ABC. Because I was like hitting up Latah County like, hey, a lot of us have done these public records requests. They didn't get them from them. And then there was no attribution. So ABC claims, oh, we got them. They were newly released by authorities. So of course, you know me. I'm hitting up Moscow PD. I'm hitting up Idaho State Police. We'll see what they say. Maybe they'll release them. Anyway, this is the new stuff we learned that we're about to go over. Bryan only left his parents' house in Pennsylvania 3 times after his crimes, and all 3 times he was wearing gloves. So I'm trusting these authorities. You'll see their names coming up. The way I'll edit this, maybe I'll put myself in the middle or picture-in-picture, whatever, to make it fair use, to transform it. If you want to watch the show, I'll try and link to ABC. I don't know if the full episode is anywhere except on Hulu, maybe today. Today is Saturday, September 6th, as I film this. Great show. It should air on Hulu, I believe, today. It should be streaming. But I trust these authorities. These are some people who were literally there, like on scene. These are not people who heard something secondhand. These are people, a lot of them, who were directly involved, had direct access to what was going on when Bryan Kohberger was arrested and all of that. So the gag order is lifted. There's no longer this big gap, this big room for speculation. And I believe that gag order did much more harm than good. Like the DNA lady coming up, you'll see. I kind of got these married couples confused, I think. There's the Celebrate couple, and then there's the Othram DNA couple. I think I kind of got them confused before. But anyway, very knowledgeable. Gave such a gift in a way to grieving parents by finding who that DNA belonged to. And if they had been allowed to, from the beginning, say, look, this is how we found this DNA. It was not trace DNA. We found it here on the button snap of the sheath. It is definitely attributable to this Kohberger family. I think it would have left less room for all these Kohberger fans to kind of create their own fan fiction, because no one could come out and say, oh no, that's wrong. This is what we literally found. It is DNA belonging to the Kohberger family member, and boom, it would have squashed so many things. Another thing I found out, Bryan's parents were interviewed by FBI agents from the Scranton, Pennsylvania office after his arrest, and they were aghast. I don't think we have much more information that I can remember. I mean, I still have to go through that huge ISP document, but I don't remember hearing that before, that Bryan Kohberger's parents were interviewed after his arrest, and they were just aghast. They were surprised. This is interesting too, we'll see coming up. The only conversations Kohberger's family had about the crime, basically before his arrest, they kind of questioned for a moment, like, wait a minute, could this have been Bryan? Because he drives a white Elantra. But then they immediately quashed those theories. They were like gone from their head. It's like, Bryan, no, it couldn't have been him. Maybe it's kind of true that one of the sisters or whomever may have suspected Bryan. Maybe one of the sisters brought that up. Maybe the entire family just for a moment said, could it have been him? Nah, there was no way they thought he was capable of doing anything so horrific. Now, Bryan's Pennsylvania attorney was really interesting. He said Bryan didn't even think his crimes would make national news. Coming up, we'll see, I'll just discuss what I'm showing kind of on the screen partially. Bryan's attorney back in Pennsylvania, that Jason guy we talked about before, Jason Labar, I believe his name is, how Bryan was surprised. First of all, he was so surprised he got arrested, allegedly, according to his extradition attorney, back in Pennsylvania, back in Monroe County. He was shocked. He didn't think it would make national news. I was like, what? I don't know. Part of me is thinking Bryan had designs to become the serial killer. I don't know when he decided to change his life for the worse after things went so badly with his TA job at WSU or what. But I was like, he's surprised it made national news, and he was surprised he got arrested. That shows me he isn't really a forward-thinking, smart person. He's not as smart as maybe people give him credit for. Common sense, and maybe not even intelligent. I mean, definitely evil to perpetrate a crime like this. And I'm like shocked to find out via 2020, did you know that Bryan's interview after his arrest was 2.5 to 3 hours long, per that same Pennsylvania attorney. And we saw in the documents, I've been fighting to get this video. Hopefully I can at least get the audio. I mean, it was recorded, I believe, on several devices, at least 2. At approximately 2 a.m. on December 30th, 2022, Bryan was brought to that PSP, Pennsylvania State Police, Stroudsburg Barracks, and he was placed in the interview room. And so it was recorded, definitely, but whether or not we'll get the video, that's in God's hands, But I never knew it was 2.5 to 3 hours long. I went back and looked in the Moscow PD paperwork, and I never really saw like a start time, stop time to the interview. There was a lot of narrative. I mean, there was like, oh, Bryan kind of said this. There was kind of like small talk, and I thought, oh, maybe a few minutes of small talk. Maybe it was 20 minutes, I don't know, before he started really saying, well, maybe I really need a lawyer. So I didn't know it was nearly 3 hours long. We've got to hear that at some point, I hope. Now, before we get into the 2020, let's chat a little bit. Since I'm, on camera now, we can talk a little bit more about Bethany's interview. Boy, it was so difficult to hear. I've listened to that like twice, 2, 3 times now, and it's very difficult because I believe Captain Blaker puts maybe his phone kind of across the table, and the table's shaking. And of course, Bethany is very upset. I cannot blame her. She's just upset, and it's hard to understand. Combined with so many redactions, there's a lot of factors that make that interview hard to hear. But we know it took place less than 10 hours after the event, so it's like, whoa. She's sobbing, and she has her hoodie on, which I don't blame her. She probably felt so comfy. Like, I love this sweater. My friend helped me pick out, but it just makes you feel comfy on it was cold back then, November 13th, and they had been through such a traumatic event. No wonder she had her hoodie on and bundled up, and she's, of course, blurred out. But she's with Captain Blaker. It's before 2 p.m. It's still that Sunday. She's probably still trying to get in her mind that, oh my goodness, 4 of my really good friends are gone. Dylan and I survived. I can't imagine trying to get that through her head. The stuff I could hear was when she talked about Kaylee previously saw some type of shadowy figure, a silhouette outside the home. Weeks prior, maybe a month prior, Bethany, her voice did quiver, and she was upset. She was telling him at first what happened the night before. So Saturday night, everyone was pretty much together. Then Maddie left to go to the club with Kaylee. That's the corner club. And Bethany was with Ethan and Xana most of the night.
Ethan was in the house, so was Xana.
So you were with
one of them is my roommates, and one of them is her boyfriend.
Okay. So you were with Ethan
and Xana.
Xana? Mm-hmm. Can you spell that for me?
X-A-N-Y. Or A-N-A, sorry.
X-A-N-A. N-A, okay. Okay, so I'm just trying to... Sometimes it helps me to put names together.
Mm-hmm.
So you were with Ethan and Xana last night, is that right?
Yeah.
And do you know Ethan's last name?
Kaden. I don't know how to spell it.
That's fine. And Xana's last name?
Kernidle.
Do you know spell it?
I think it's K-E-R-N-O. Maybe another O-D-L-E or something like that.
Okay. Okay, so you were with them at 6. What time did you guys get to Pacific Guys last night?
around 8 something. Maybe 8:30.
So 8:30 p.m.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. And prior to that, were you guys just at your house?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you left from your house.
Ethan was that formal because he went with his sister because she didn't have a date. And then we were just hanging out at our house. And then he came over and then we all walked over together.
Okay, so that was you, Ethan, Xana. Was there another person with you? Or just the three of you that
Maddie walked over with us.
Okay, and that's...
Logan.
Logan?
Mm-hmm.
Is it M-A-D-D-I-E?
Mm-hmm. Her real name is Madison, though, I believe.
Okay. So you guys all walked over to... You were there about 8:30. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Were you guys all pretty much together or just kind of mingling throughout the house most of the night?
We were all pretty much together, and then Maddie left to go to the club with Kaylee.
So Bethany, I did hear that part where she talked about walking home around 1 a.m. She watched Vampire Diaries with some friend. That friend left.
And then I was with Ethan and Xana most of the night, but then one of my friends came. Her name is Dee, and I hung out with her the rest of the night.
Okay, and who was that?
Her name is Yes.
Can you spell it for me? Okay, and his last name?
I don't know how to pronounce it, and her full name is bigger than that.
Okay, that's fine. Do you have a phone number for her?
Yeah.
It's in the phone. Okay, we can get that in a minute. Okay, so you were with, and at that point, Ethan and Xana were just kind of hanging out still at the house. Okay.
And then I went to our other friend's house.
Okay. What time was that at?
I don't know, maybe like 12-ish. But that could be wrong.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
And where's that house at?
It's just like up the street. I don't know that address.
Okay, up the street from...
Sigma Chi,
Okay.
kind of.
So you guys are at Sigma Chi, so you're walking back towards...
We're walking back towards my house, and then went up this way.
So like when you got to Taylor Street, you went up? So if you walked all the way from Sigma News...
Or Sigma
Chi, sorry.
Yeah. You know the apartments, the whites?
Yep, I know the whites.
It's like that street, that way.
So on Taylor?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Do you know roughly where on Taylor? Or does she live maybe on one of the other off streets?
It's on Taylor, but it's like one of the end houses by the intersection. I don't know how to explain it.
Alright. Okay. And whose house is it that you went to?
It's... And I don't know their other roommate.
And... Okay. Alright, so you and you're at this house. How long were you here?
Maybe like 40 minutes.
Okay.
And then I left by myself and went back to my house.
So you walked home maybe around 1-ish?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you see when you got home?
We're sitting on the couch watching Vampire Diaries. No one else was home yet.
No one else was home yet. So, wow, just think, Bethany was there by herself at 1 a.m. All of this is probably going through her mind too, like, oh my goodness, what if he would have come and done whatever to me, Bryan Kohberger, when I was by myself? I mean, I can't imagine what she was thinking.
And is another roommate or what's last name?
She's in that room.
Oh, okay. And
I actually don't remember her last name right now.
that's fine. And is live with you guys too, or just
It's
visit?
just a friend.
Okay.
and then she left.
Do you know what time she left at?
No.
Okay. But you were all watching
Vampire Diaries.
Okay. And anything happened during that time period?
We were just hanging out.
Okay. Do you know who else was in the house at that time?
No one. Just
No one?
us.
Just the three of you? Okay. So, let's go a little bit more then. What happened next?
Maddie and Kaylee came home from the club. Left.
Maddie and who?
Kaylee.
Kaylee? Okay. And they got home from the club. You know what time that might have been?
I think I told one of the cops that was talking to me at the house, like, better times.
That's okay.
I don't really remember right now. Maybe like
Okay.
2 something, 1.
So if you got home around 1, that would have put them getting
Like
home.
1:45, 2, something like that.
So near bar break, if you had to guess.
What?
Like near bar break.
What does that mean?
Bars normally close at 2 o'clock here.
Oh, yeah. They went to Grub Truck after, so
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
But she does mention Maddie and Kaylee came home around 2 a.m. They had gone to the grub truck, so she knew all that. She said, we all hung out in Kaylee's room for a little and talked. I mean, that had to be another thing she thought about. Whoa, what about when we were all, upstairs on the 3rd floor? What if he would have come in then and attacked everyone?
What'd you do after that, after Maddie and Kaylee got home?
We all hung out in Kaylee's room for a little. And then talked, and then Maddie and I took Murphy out to pee, the dog. And then I said I was going to go to bed because I was tired. And she said she was going to go to bed too. And then I went to my room. I was going to sleep. And she came and knocked and asked if I had Murphy. And I said no. And then I went to bed.
Okay. So what time do you think you took Murphy out?
From like 3 to 2:30.
2:30 to 3?
Yeah.
Okay. And where do you normally take Murphy to go to the bathroom?
Just the back door in the
Okay.
kitchen.
But anyway, Kaylee went to walk her dog, Murphy, and Bethany eventually went to bed. There's a point in there, I think, where Bethany might say she went outside for a little bit with Kaylee. Very hard to hear. I hope the next audio coming is much clearer. But Bethany was saying she was half asleep. She saw some kind of firework or spark or something that sparkled under her door. I don't know what that was.
So which one is 1122? So if I'm coming up King Road off of Taylor,
It's the big white house up there.
all the way at the very top on the right?
Well, it's technically on Queen, but the address is King.
Okay. So is it the one that's tucked back as you're going up to 500 Clean Road? Those big apartments? It's kind of tucked back just a little bit? Mm-hmm. Okay. So you normally go out the back deck then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I know how Cheshire at then. Okay. So you go there. You and Maddie take the dog out.
Mm-hmm.
And then how long do you think that took?
I was out there for maybe like 10 seconds.
Okay. Okay. So then you both come back in. So you and Maddie both
I
come
came
back
in
in.
before she did.
Okay. Did Maddie still have the dog then?
Yes, I think so.
So you went out for a little bit, came back in. Do you know what time Maddie came back in?
Mm-mm.
And you went straight to bed when you came back in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How long after you went to bed do you think Maddie came in?
Actually, I came in, grabbed some chips, into my room, and watched a show for a little, and then I went to bed.
What were you watching?
It's called Baby Daddy.
Okay. How long do you think you watched it?
Maybe like 30 minutes.
So one episode maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or like a half.
Okay. And did Maddie come in during that show or after?
She just knocked on my door, I think, during, and asked if I had Murphy, and I said no.
Okay. Then what happened after that?
I just went to bed, and then I woke up and I was like half asleep, and I just thought I saw like a firework or something, like it just sparkled like under my door, and I thought I heard like something kind of fall, And then Murphy barked, but I thought people were just making like food, like, and Ethan was here or something and knocked something over because he's usually loud in the kitchen upstairs.
Okay. So what do you mean by you heard a firework?
It sounded like a little firework, and then there was like a spark. I went by my, like, I'm on the bottom floor.
Okay.
And so it kind of looked like it came down there, but I don't know.
Part of me wonders still, I don't know if this is the point when Molly, the DoorDash driver, showed up, and you know how Molly was there around 15 minutes according to authorities. You know how Molly was like shining her flashlight? Whatever, she was like looking for addresses, I guess. Part of me wonders, was that the spark that Bethany might have seen? I don't know if that timeline lines up. Bethany did say she thought she heard somebody kind of fall. She thought she heard Murphy barking. She's like, I thought people were just up there, you know, making food, knock something over. These might have been kind of common sounds. I know some people just love to just jump on these surviving roommates. Heaven help these girls. But some of these might have been sounds that Bethany was kind of used to, like especially on a party weekend. You know, they've been drinking, they've partied, and Bethany's like, I'm going to bed. And I wonder if both Dylan and Bethany thought, oh my goodness, like what are they doing? They're just making noise. Is someone in there cooking, dropping something, whatever? I feel like I kind of heard Bethany say something to that effect. Again, I'll have to watch it again with headphones on and try and clear up the voices and enhance them, because I feel like I thought I heard Bethany say something about what Ethan normally would do. Ethan was super athletic. I wonder if he was the type of, you know, I found like, it sounds like she said something about not bouncing a basketball, something. I have to go back and listen. Very hard to hear. At that point too, Bethany also said it sounded like a little firework, and then there's like a spark. I'm on the bottom floor. It kind of looked like it came down there, but I don't know. So I don't know what that was. But then Bethany did try by 4:20 a.m. to call all her roommates. No one was answering. She thought they just went to bed or something.
And so is Murphy your dog?
Kaylee's dog.
Kaylee's dog?
Kaylee and her ex-boyfriend's dog.
Okay. So you heard Murphy bark right after you heard what you thought was a firecracker?
Yeah, something like that, but he like, I don't know, dogs bark at random things. And sometimes when he's happy, he'll bark. Okay.
It didn't sound like an angry growl or anything like that, just a bark?
I don't really know. I was like half asleep.
Okay.
It just sounded like bark.
So, hear the firework, kind of see a spark underneath the door. Mm-hmm. Murphy barks. What'd you hear after that?
Pretty much nothing.
Nothing?
That's it.
Okay. And you thought maybe someone was just in the kitchen at that point?
Yeah, just like someone accidentally fell into the table or something.
Okay.
And she was like with Murphy.
Do you know about what time that might have been? Do you have any idea?
4 or something. I tried to call all of them at like 4:20ish around that time, and no one was answering. I thought they just went to bed or something.
So that's when Dylan had called her, how she describes how Dylan had called her. Dylan said she thinks she saw someone, and Bethany's like, I didn't know really what to think of it, because sometimes we think we hear things a lot. But it's usually, this is it, it's usually just Ethan walking around.
Okay. What happened after that?
And called me, and she said she thinks she saw someone. And I didn't know, like, really what to think of it, because sometimes we think we hear things a lot in the house, but it's usually just Ethan walking around. But she came, I told her to come in my room, and she could sleep with me, and we could lock the door, and just stay in there just in case if there was anything, and that's all I know. And then I fell back asleep.
You didn't hear anything else?
Mm-mm.
Okay. No one else talking?
Didn't hear something.
Okay. Did you make it to your room then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What time do you think she got in your room?
Around like 4:20, 4:30.
Okay, about the same time?
Yeah.
Where's her room located to yours?
I'm the only one on the bottom floor, right by the front door.
Okay.
And then you go up the stairs, and Xana's room, and Xana's room, the kitchen, and then upstairs is Maddie and Kaylee's room.
Okay. And where's your room?
Right by the kitchen.
Right by the kitchen? Mm-hmm. Okay. And did she say anything to you when she got into the room?
She said she thought she saw a man, but I didn't know what to think of it. I was like still half asleep, and I was like,
Okay.
It didn't sound like I didn't hear screams, I didn't hear anything. I didn't really know.
Okay. Okay.
But I told her to come in my room and we could lock the door and stay there just in case if there was anything. That's all I know. So they were really confused. And there's people in this documentary one guy who's really kind to the girl situation and Dylan's situation, trying to describe the confusion. Because hindsight, of course, is what? 2020. That's why they named this show, I'm sure, 2020. 2020 vision. You don't know everything. We're not omniscient. We don't know everything going on in our own home, even right now. We don't know. We just pray we're protected, but we don't know. Bethany said she believed that talk with Dylan happened around 4:20 or 4:30. That's when they believe, Bryan Kohberger did what he did upstairs and then left. And he sped away as they found the surveillance footage later. And Dylan said she thought she saw a man. She didn't know what to think of it. Bethany said, I was still half asleep. It didn't sound like I couldn't hear screams. Bethany is all the way down on the first floor, so she didn't hear as much as Dylan heard. Bethany's like, I didn't hear anything. I didn't really know. And so that's when she starts getting questioned about, does anyone in your house have an issue with anyone, with her ex-boyfriends? And Bethany's like, no, all their ex-boyfriends are really nice. They're still good friends. She starts talking about, obviously, Kaylee and Jack's relationship, still, on great terms.
And obviously she didn't say anything more than she just saw someone.
Yeah, that's all I remember her saying.
So your bed then, if I'm looking at the right house, you have a parking lot, front door, and your bedroom's just to the right? Okay. And that's where you slept from by the time you finally got into your room around 4-ish or so. Actually before that.
So like 3 something.
Yeah. So you were in there sleeping. Okay. Dylan got to your room maybe somewhere around 4:20ish, but Dylan was already home at that point. You knew that Maddie and Kaylee were home. Do you know when anyone else in the house got home?
I don't know when Xana or Ethan got home. I didn't hear them come in or anything.
Okay. Okay. And the last time you saw Xana and Ethan was at the Sid McKay's? Okay. So, did you see anything weird at the party there at this?
Just normal.
Okay. And since how the way that they're set up, were everyone hanging out primarily up in the main common room area, or were most people hanging out in individual rooms and stuff like that?
It was a little bit of a mixture. At first it was in the apartments, and then it was the main room.
Okay.
And then as I was leaving, I went in to grab a backpack from our friend's room, and Xana and Ethan were sitting on the couch just listening to music.
Okay.
And
And that was up in the main room, or that was in some?
that was in an apartment.
That was in an apartment? Okay. Did you hear of anything that happened to anybody? Was there anyone strange or odd hanging around the party? Okay. Do you know of anybody in your house that has an issue with anyone? Any ex-boyfriends? Anything like that?
All their ex-boyfriends were really nice, and they still were good friends.
Okay.
And then that's when he asked about any of your roommates had a problem with, anyone stalking them. And Bethany's like, no, at first. But then she did describe a time where she's like, wait a minute, about a month ago, Kaylee was alone. She took her dog out and she saw this shadowy figure staring at her. Bethany said about Kaylee, She said she swears she saw someone staring at her.
Have you ever had any of your roommates complain about anyone stalking them?
Once though, Kaylee said when everyone was like gone, me and were at the sorority house for a meeting, and it was only Kaylee, and she was taking Murphy out to pee. This was a while ago, and she said she swears she saw someone staring at her while she was taking the dog out to pee from the
Remember how long
backyard.
ago that was?
Maybe like a month. She could see like a man silhouette like staring at her.
You think it was about a month ago? Did Kaylee have any issues with anyone? Okay. None of them have made any comments or statements of anyone trying to come onto them or anything like that.
So that does corroborate what we've heard in a lot of these police reports, Now we get to really hear it. So let's talk about Bryan's selfies real quick. So the selfies just released. We'll see who it's released by. A lot of these selfies some of them are the same ones we saw before. Some are just blurry, and some they went really fast. A lot of the selfies are in the bathroom. Like, why? If I could get through watching that American Psycho movie again, I would. I remember, it came out all the way in 2000. I was like, why is this Bryan Kohberger's favorite movie? He was born in 1994. American Psycho came out. He wasn't even 6 years old yet. So I was like, when did he watch this movie? When did it become his favorite movie? When did it become a character for him to ascribe to make his goal or something? Now, for those who haven't seen it, not like I'm recommending it, it was like, first time I saw it, I was like, can I make it through this? I felt like I was telling my husband, I don't even know if I can make it through this movie. But American Psycho is a 2000 black comedy horror film directed by Mary Herron. She co-wrote the screenplay, and it's based on a 1991 novel by Bret Easton Ellis. It stars Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman. Okay, and Patrick Bateman stars as this New York investment banker who leads a double life as a serial killer. So I was thinking, was this Bryan's aim all along? Is this why he made this transition point in his life from, overweight bullied kid to thinner fit guy, maybe still not getting the attention he wants? So when did he switch it to, okay, I'm going to become infamous? Like, when did he make that decision? When did he watch this movie? Anyway, and did he watch Psycho? Is that why he's calling his mother and father mother? So these selfies are the main thing. You'll notice a lot of these selfies were taken in his bathroom. You can even see like his toilet seat in one of them. And one, he's standing in front of the shower curtain again, infamous. Did he just like that lighting or what? I know, bathrooms, some of them can have great lighting, but I don't know. But he took more that we hadn't seen before either, which I'm hoping will be released. I have a feeling, again, they got leaked to ABC, so I don't know if they were really released by authorities. They didn't get very specific on that. But anyway, Bryan, it looks like it pains him to try and crack a smile. He's kind of like in one. I don't know if he's trying to smile. Another, it's like the back of his head. Earphones just go around his ear. Initially, people thought they were the bone conduction ones that go all the way around. Maybe certain bone conduction ones just go around the ear. I should look that up. But it's so apropos because you can see his vanity, his mirror, kind of there on top of the towel rack, and you see the back of his head. And maybe he was just, shooting photos, of course, to see what does the back of my hair look like. So it's interesting, but there's a lot of bathroom selfies. Maybe he just wanted to check out his hair. But of course, the most hilarious one people are talking about, it's the one where it looks like he has on a new pair of jeans. I wanted to see if I could see what size these jeans were. He's taking a photo. You can't really tell, I don't think. If I can figure it out, I'll put it on there. But it looks like he has a new pair of jeans because he still has the tag on them. He's looking weird, but he's taking the selfie like maybe he's trying to see how do these fit. all these selfies reminded me of his vanity and how it just, exploded into nothingness. None of it mattered. And there's another thumbs up one where he was hiking, I guess, across different places. I don't know where these locations are. One really beautiful. There's one with, snow-covered mountains. There were some others I have to find. We'll look through them. They were off in the water. Oh my goodness. Let's start with this Idaho Justice breakdown. I'm giving you just the highlights. But yeah, the selfies were pretty prominent, and how the timing of certain selfies was very important when he did that hoodie selfie right after watching, only a couple of days after watching this YouTube documentary or video or whatever about Ted Bundy. That's when Ted Bundy had on that kind of hoodie. So Bryan puts on his hoodie, like he's adapted a new way of living. And then there's a few photos from evidence that were on the court website. Not all of them were working, but I see Maddie and Xana and Kaylee. But basically we had a whole bunch of different people in this Idaho documentary on ABC. There's Lauren Patterson. She's the reporter with Northwest Public Broadcasting. We've seen her before in the Idaho 4 documentary. And of course they, open up, Kana Whitworth, she did, chef's kiss. Just wait till you get to the part towards the end. This question she asks, Santa Claus, as it were, that's what Kaylee's dad called him, Bill Thompson, when he was it was inappropriate to me. It's like, he's saying something about Kohberger. We were happy, basically, that he pleaded guilty, and she stood up for the victims' families. She's going to say, look, not every victim's family was so happy about this plea deal that Bryan took, so that was great. So anyway, you know how they open up with different people, different snippets. We're going to hear from Josie Lauterin. That's a friend. We know her interview's coming as well. Lieutenant Darren Gilbertson, he's the lead investigator with ISP. So the things he reveals, pretty interesting too. People who were boots on the ground there. So they opened up about Moscow. There's another friend here, Phoebe McGrath. Just like the semester was a very happy place, how, everyone's looking forward to a new August, a new semester. Step on campus, this feels right. Feels good to be here. Everyone's excited until it just took a turn for the worse. They have Maisie Chapin, who is Ethan's sister. Oh my goodness, she was great. And of course, Olivia Gonzalez, she talked about her victim's impact statement and so much more, just really humanizing, making them very personal. Maddie and Kaylee, I like when they open talking about the victims and giving you really good insight into them as people. There was this guy, Elijah Hall, he's going to be going off on YouTubers and TikTokers who were streaming outside and stuff. So they were trying to figure out who did it. This guy was good too, Special Agent Ed Jacobson. And it says he's retired now. And I thought, wait, did he really work on this case? And I had to search for his name in the documents. And yes, he was there. He was there when he first got the name, December 19th or so. We'll go over it, Bryan Kohberger. So I like hearing from all these people who have been gagged for so long, they can finally speak out, and they were literally there. So there's Elijah complaining about YouTubers, and then there's going to be Hunter Johnson and Emily Alant, their experience with Dylan calling them that morning and coming over, and how Hunter's going to say, he had a feeling, something was bad. He had a feeling he needed to just get over to that house. And just the whole aftermath of this whole situation that Bryan wreaked on this entire town, towns, both campuses. He had a horrible impact on the entire area. So Bryan was pursuing this PhD in criminology, and so we see different selfies. Why did he take so many selfies is my question. And then that funny one, and him another thumbs up one where he's hiking. We're going to talk about people who tried to befriend him, like that guy Josh back east, and why would Bryan turn that down, and the impact perhaps of him being bullied. We'll hear from this Jared Barnhart. He's the head of CX strategy and customer advocacy with Celebrite. So this couple, they worked a lot on Bryan's phone. And, the weird things, him calling his mother and father, his parents mother and father. They're talking about Greek life, it being such a tight-knit community, how the fraternities and sororities did everything together. They were their own little community. They're talking about Xana just welcoming in her friends to the sorority. I love that Emily says that. It's so sweet. Emily is like, how you meet some people and they barely want to talk to you? Well, that would kind of be maybe a Kohberger, right? But she's like, Xana would just talk your ear off. And that was so sweet. And so they show Xana humanizing her again on her sister Jasmine Kronodal's TikTok. And this video about how she a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and she just made people feel comfortable. I think Emily said, these are going to be my people. So Xana was only 20. She loved the Steelers. She loved music. They show videos of Xana like jumping on the bed or jumping on the couch. And it's like, wait, don't mess up my laptop there. And Ava Wood, she's been speaking out quite a bit too. We know she used to live right down the street from the 1122 King Road. And she talked about that time she heard someone in October potentially trying to open her door. So I will always wonder, was that Kohberger too? One time it was snowing and she just went down, sledding with Xana. It went so fast. And so they have all these wonderful memories. I'm glad they have memories. So it was August when Xana moved into that 1122 King Road house with all the other roommates, of course. They'll talk about how they called it like the big girl's house, and I got that kind of from reading the Idaho 4 book, like something to aspire to almost, like, oh yeah, that's the house you can potentially get into. Like, who knew that was going to happen? It was good to see Hunter Chapin, Ethan's brother, his twin on here. Well, twin, triplet, one of three, Even they even talked about like Hunter and Maisie. It's like they've spoken about, wow, not even telling people they are triplets anymore, because then people who don't know they're related to this tragedy, they don't want to. This was in a different interview, but I remember it because it was just so impactful. What do they tell people? They don't want to tell people like, oh yeah, we're triplets, and then have random strangers asking, oh, well, where's your brother? And have to deal with that. No, I think they just tell people they're twins now, potentially. Of course, not to disrespect Ethan or anything, but they've followed each other, of course, their entire lives. They just show all these cute baby pictures. It would have been tough to split us up, they say. Oh, these pictures are so cute. They kind of did everything together. So that's why they went to Sigma Chi together, the boys did. Why not do college together? Hunter and Ethan joined the same frat. Just a beautiful pictures, because ABC got a lot of their pictures from the family. Since Ethan was kind of like the dominant triplet, I don't know, they kind of followed him, his brother and sister. And of course, Stacy Chapin was there. You've got to watch her Crime Con videos where she's being interviewed. They're so good, where she talks about the gag order and so many other things. But these triplets, they just were going to have a good time. They just show little snippets of Ethan talking, him being a great athlete, his friend, Peter Goria, a friend, reminiscing, singing, learning songs, just being totally silly. I'm glad they have those memories. And I was really grateful for this too, that it truly was Parents Weekend just the weekend before. Stacy Chapin wrote on Instagram, best day. You can just see her hanging out with her husband and their children, just all of them together, just 1 week before the tragedy. Of course, they had no idea tragedy was coming, but I was grateful that they got that time. And they reminisce, like, it was just such a great weekend, Parents Weekend. So much so when Stacy and her husband drove away, she was really thinking, that's it, we did it. We raised our kids. They're becoming independent. They're adulting. Like, it had to be such a good feeling, like moving on to a next phase. But now she didn't know, of course, and her husband didn't know the phase they would be moving into potentially could be regarding fighting for justice for victims by using DNA in the same way it was used in this case. Or perhaps, I don't know, hopefully politically showing people that gag orders aren't necessarily a great thing. They're not going to maybe do what you think they're going to do. I just think she's really on to a great next phase to help so many people in spite of and because of course, what she's been through. what all of them have been through. Everyone who loved and lost. They were talking about when they were there eating at the Mad Greek. This was the week before. And then they also talk about November 7th. According to Xana's sister, she posted on Instagram something about close friends, getting to experience one of her favorite songs with some of her best friends. She was saying, enjoy the ride, not the destination. That's a really cool, it just reminds you to like live in the moment, like take those moments and don't assume people, they'll be there tomorrow. Don't assume, but just really, truly soak up the moment. And then they're like, little did they know what was coming. So they do a little, recap usually, but then they flip over to Jason LaBar. He's the chief public defender of Monroe County. And so they're talking about Pennsylvania. They do this big flip, like, whoa, what's that like? Over in Pennsylvania, it's like a lot of skiing. It's a resort type area. That's where Bryan Kohberger grew up, in the Pocono area. His dad, Michael, maintenance worker, his mom, Mary Ann, she worked in education, and his two older sisters. So he was the baby of the bunch. You think he would have grown up like the youngest spoiled male child, well taken care of. I know his parents did their best, and his sisters, I'm sure, but it flipped. He didn't grow up like this pampered baby boy. I don't know where it flipped in his mind, but something flipped and it just went off the rails. So he was raised in that Indian Mountain Lake community, common everyday household, the lawyer calls it. His parents were very involved in his life. Bryan went to that Pleasant Valley School District on the west end of the Poconos. He attended middle school there. He moved on to senior high. What kind of student was he? Well, the lawyer's saying, I'd say based upon what I've learned about the case, Bryan was an average student. Now, this is the part where I did start to feel sorry. I felt empathetic for Bryan. Of course, this has given him no excuses to do what he did, but maybe it could have an impact, hopefully, on people like just stop bullying other kids. Now, of course, many of us have gotten bullied, or we've had something people talk about, like back in school. My teeth. I used to have like really buck teeth before I had my braces. So I would get teased about that, or I would get teased about being younger, since I was younger than most of my classmates. Really something silly to be teased about. Not much ridicule. But Bryan, he was an overweight kid, and this is Casey Arntz. This is Bryan's former friend, so we've heard from her before, a lot. But people would throw stuff at him on the bus, or just throw stuff at him maybe in class because of his weight. He was picked on. He got isolated from his friends that he had at that time. So I don't know, how did he get isolated? I wish someone would have stuck by Bryan's side as a friend, or did he, just because of all that mistreatment, did he then turn it around? And I'm wondering, when is the point Bryan told himself, like, I don't know, I'm going to just be a shell. I'm not going to let anyone in, or I'm going to just turn my angst and anger all around on everyone else. So this is when the FBI agent, again, Ed Jacobson, says, he was basically socially awkward, very few relationships. And this is Casey. I found it interesting too. She's like, he never really had what I would consider to be a girlfriend. And I found that interesting because, Bryan, this overweight, picked on boy, got stuff thrown at him. That's bad. And then even after all this time, he lost the weight. That Casey knew him a little bit later too, growing up after he lost the weight, but he never really had a girlfriend that she knew of. And I was thinking, it just makes you wonder, why? I don't know why. Maybe did Bryan lose this weight and expect to be God's gift to women, and so was he going for women, I don't know, out of his league? Like, what was he trying to do? And was it his horrible personality? I guess I always try and feel there's almost someone for everyone, so it baffles me why Bryan wouldn't have a long-term relationship with someone. The lawyer saying Bryan was kind of skittish in a way. He didn't really want to talk to people. He's gone through a lot of transformation in his life, and the reporter's like, what kind of transformation? Physically? It's like, just generally, yeah, he was overweight. He had lost a considerable amount of weight heading into maybe his, 9th or 10th grade year. That's what I was wondering. We've talked about that before too, with Bryan literally losing all that weight. And now we found out his diagnoses and his problems. They like to say, oh yeah, he turned vegan. Maybe he truly did turn vegan in a way. I don't know when, but we went over how he started going to that boxing gym. His dad took him all the time. His dad sounded great. His dad was really trying to help him. And him losing weight too, with his recent diagnoses. Not only was he diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder and what was it, ADHD, but also that one that truly is kind of like disordered eating. So I wonder when that began. We will learn that some of this stuff began in childhood, but it wasn't diagnosed until going through his, well, would have been his trial, you know. So it's interesting. He started trimming down, and I always wonder how he trimmed down, because we're going to get into his little habit coming up. So yeah, he had a trainer he grew very fond of. Remember, we talked about that guy, Jesse, who owned that gym. It kept him losing the weight, you know, being in the gym. He was improving his life. But yeah, they're saying that newer, thinner, more athletic version, Bryan 2.0, it didn't last, you know. This Lieutenant Darren again starts speaking. He learned about Bryan stealing from his sister, stealing his sister's phone. Now, this is from Lieutenant Darren. They learned he had some struggles with drug use. They found a history of an arrest in 2014, and I still can't find, like, where's this arrest paperwork? Why is everything like such a secret, you know? I wish people would just publish more PDFs and more documents. You will also sometimes you'll find people like referring to a court document, but you won't always see them like literally publishing the court document, especially one like this. But this is part of the report, said that there was a problem with a certain addiction for Bryan at the time. So this is in 2014. Bryan is a 20-year-old. So by the time he's 20, somehow he got addicted to this substance. And it does say these police reports were reviewed by ABC News in February of 2014. Bryan recently exited a rehab center and rejoined his family. So by then, we've heard about him being in rehab, going through all these issues. Bryan had taken his sister's phone. Now, they talked to someone who didn't want to give his full name, this guy named John, but he called this guy named John to come pick him up. He wanted to sell a phone. So in July of 2023, I guess they spoke with this John guy. But John, he's on the phone and he's saying, we were leaving a party, you know, and he called him. And Kana Whitworth does say there's documents that ABC, myself included, have seen that show he stole his sister's phone. Bryan called this John guy and he said he needed to sell a phone somewhere. And then they're like, well, what were you going to do with it? And John is a little elusive, but you can assume what he's saying. He's saying we were trying to basically get some stuff with it. So I believe that guy. And his father turned him in at that point because, you know, they were dealing with that substance abuse addiction that Bryan had. And it was, again, reviewed by ABC News, and they confirmed that Kohberger was charged with misdemeanor theft, but local officials told us that he didn't serve any jail time. And what about the family? The whole process? His family would say that they believed him to be sober ever since high school. So that's weird, that evolution. Maybe Bryan was, he wasn't, I don't know what he was. I mean, I applaud his dad. We went over that from the Idaho 4 book for, you know, they were at their wits' end, I'm sure. And he's got his sister's phone. He's conning this guy, John, into, come on, let's go sell this phone, you know, not telling him. So allegedly, according to John, Bryan didn't tell him, oh, this is my sister's phone I'm stealing. No, they're taking it to some kiosk and selling it for about half the price, his sister's iPhone. And he had also, remember, he tricked Casey to take him places. Bryan must not have had a car back then or something, because he's getting all these rides from people. You know, he had tricked Casey saying, oh, take me to this one restaurant and then take me to CVS because I really need, you know, to get needles for my aunt. She's a diabetic. So he was just using people and lying to them. Now, when did Bryan really stop? Did he really stop when he got out of rehab around 20 years old or so? I don't know, but he was doing better in school. They say he was focused on something he really wanted to do. He got into criminology, and he even got that job working as a security guard for Pleasant Valley High School. But I feel like Bryan wasn't really on, I mean, it sounded like his life was shifting. He was going into a better path. Hopefully he was clean, but he was still a weirdo. I mean, remember they found those different women's IDs from when he was a security guard? So what was he doing with that? So he transitioned again after a year or two. His interest in criminology started growing even more. He went to Northampton, then he went to DeSales University, finished his degree there. Seems like he was turning his life around. Everything seems to be on the up and up. However, they start reading, according to a pretrial motion that stated Mr. Kohberger has met the criteria for this diagnosis since childhood. And the thing is, they don't know if Bryan knew or the family knew or anything that he suffered from these disorders we've talked about. So they flip and they start talking to Benjamin Mogan a little bit, Maddie's dad. They're talking about Kaylee and Maddie's relationship, how they were even closer than sisters. They were really each other's best friend. They show pictures of Maddie when she was little, just so cute. How Maddie was born when her parents were pretty young. She was such a super easy, happy baby, and even though her parents split up and her mom married and met this guy, Scott, how he was so happy Scott was when Maddie finally called him dad. I mean, just really cute. Maddie was like Karen's mini-me, her mom's mini-me. So Scott Laramie appears. They use some of the same footage from the Idaho 4 documentary. Really good. And it just really made him feel so proud when she called him dad. I love when Karen said, I never let Maddie cry, like never. I don't blame her. You know, she was just a happy girl and her mom was just doting on her. And then they move into Kaylee's family. Kaylee was like a spitfire. She's the daughter of Steve and Christy Gonzalez, of course, and they show her being the real middle child, you know. And Olivia speaks, these are the cutest photos. Olivia says, I remember the day Kaylee was born. So Olivia is about 4.5 years older than Kaylee. So no wonder she felt so protective of the girls, you know, giving that victim impact statement. She said she wanted to take their power back. Oh, it was so good. So they talked about Kaylee having middle child syndrome. I like to see Steve and Christy smiling, just talking about their daughter. Steve said Kaylee would be really sweet at first, but, you know, once she got to know you, she'd start being a bit more herself, which was a little bit more maybe ornery. And Kaylee was the funny one. Kaylee kind of transitioned. She's this bubbly, sweet girl. And Maddie was always like the quieter one, and how just what a perfect match they were as friends. Because it's like her sister says, Kaylee's soul recognized something in Maddie's soul and vice versa. And as sharp and bullheaded as Kaylee was, man, she really softened. And then at the same token, Maddie kind of came out of her shell more. So it was a beneficial, beautiful, complemented each other type of friendship. They even talked to a teacher, this teacher, Donna Staub. She was an English teacher, Lake City High School, and she taught Maddie and Kaylee. She remembers, you know, they were juniors in class in 2017, just coming in, chatting with each other. That was really cute too. And then they decided, okay, let's go to the University of Idaho. That's like 85 miles or so from their home. And they decided to go there together. But it was wild how, it was really interesting. It wasn't until 2022, until Kaylee and Maddie decided to live together. Well, you know, remember they were kind of heartbroken. They didn't get into the same sororities. And I think that's something kind of done by design, they say. Potentially by some sororities to just maybe break up best friends, maybe give them the opportunity to meet other friends. But they moved into that house, and around the same time, you know, it's May 2022, Bryan Kohberger's 27. He's graduating from DeSales. He has his bachelor's and his master's. I mean, he had accomplished quite a bit, especially, you know, the rough road he went through. From the outside, I could see why people really would think, yeah, he's turned his life totally around. And then they interview this guy, Josh Ferrero. He seemed like he could have been a great friend to Kohberger. They were looking for project partners in one class, and Josh is like, hey, you know, he saw someone, Bryan was standing there, who needed a partner. He's like, hey, do you want to be my partner? And he's like, yeah, and that's how they met. So they show Josh's old photos, he said Bryan aspired to be a cop. That's what he wanted to do. Oh, I'm so grateful Bryan never made it, especially when, thank God, we'll see about Chief Jenkins, about furthermore why he denied embedding Bryan into the Pullman police force. Can you imagine him being embedded in a police force? To me, heaven forbid, that would have made it even easier. Maybe this was Bryan's diabolical plan. It would have made it easier for him as a police officer to commit and cover up crimes if he had access to, evidence and of course weapons and crime scenes and all of these things, evidence, just so much information about people. Oh, it would have just been horrible. So I'm grateful Chief Jenkins followed his gut. We'll talk about that later. But Bryan did want to become a cop, but Josh says he didn't delve too much into his personal life. He's, a lonely guy, and Josh even reached out to him. So people did try with Bryan, and what I don't understand is why he didn't really reciprocate. Josh didn't want to pry, but he said, look, man, I'm having a party or whatever. Do you want to come over or whatever? Bryan turned him down. Like, no, I'm good, man. And he's like, all right. He's like, he put the offer out there. So I know Bryan was busy, like he was getting through school. He had the long drive. He had to go back as a security guard. But I don't know, maybe it was something else where I wonder if Bryan preferred to be lonely and alone. Like, why wouldn't he reciprocate with this guy? These are the things I think about, but the offer was there. So they show snippets of Professor Dr. Catherine Ramsland, forensic psychology professor at DeSales. And of course, she's not really talking about Bryan. They're just talking about her experience with BTK, the serial killer, and how in the classes Bryan would have taken with her, you study serial killers, you get into the psyche of the mind. Josh does say Bryan was really invested in these serial killers, and we'll see him searching for more serial killers on Christmas Day in 2022. More on that later too. He was really invested. He took quick notes. He'd ask a lot of questions. His eyes really opened up, or getting the answer when they were talking about Jeffrey Dahmer or BTK or Ted Bundy. He was like really into that. So maybe Bryan had all this knowledge. Did he have an admiration of these guys in his head? Did he even know he was maybe heading this path? And when we talk about him dressing as Ted Bundy, 2 days after he watched that YouTube video with the thumbnail with Bundy and the hoodie, had Bryan solidified, this is what I'm really going to do. I've done the first one, November 13th. Did he plan to do many more of those horrific crimes? Did he plan to become a serial murderer? And is that why Bryan was so shocked when he was arrested? Because in his mind, did he plan to, okay, I'll go back to Washington, even though I don't have that TA job anymore. How would he plan to pay for it? Lord knows. Did he plan to steal money too? I don't know. But we saw all the stuff he left in his apartment, which to me was a lot of stuff to leave if you're moving. He, I believe, planned to go back to Washington because remember on the ride out, it's December. Bryan knows he's in trouble. He knows he's losing his job, but he still tells the cop, yeah, actually I am. Yeah, I actually do work at WSU, So he's still claiming and holding on to that whole persona, that identity. Yes, I still work there. So how long would he have kept that up? If he hadn't have been arrested, would he have headed back to WSU? Even would he have done like a Sidney Powell, like the girl from Akron, Ohio, when she flunked out of college, but she just, in her delusional state, she just kept going. Like she kept going to the campus. She told her friends like, oh, I don't, my ID doesn't work because something, gave excuses. Would Bryan have continued that kind of ruse? Would he have gone back and tried to really fight for his job? I don't know. But the campuses are so close together. They talk about U of I and Wazoo, just 7 miles away. And they even talk to a couple of Bryan's former students like Neil Markert. He was Bryan Kohberger's former students. And this was pretty interesting. They show Bryan Kohberger's apartment outside of it. He's 27 years old and he had never lived on his own before, but he ended up moving well across the country. Well, I know he had only applied to one California school and another one for certain reasons. And 27, yeah, you'd think a person would be ready to live on their own by then, but Bryan was so dependent on his parents, speaking to them like every day, and mother, where's father? Father, mother. Should he have really moved all the way across the country? I'm always trying to think of preventative measures. Of course, he looks so happy in these selfies with his hiking and all this stuff, but was he really ready to move all the way across the country? Obviously not. So, yeah, this is the point where it says some of those selfies just released by authorities. It's very fascinating. You don't see hide or hair of any Latah County Prosecutor's Office attributions that were just on the promo recently released. So obviously they removed that, and they are not going to put like Moscow PD gave us these or ISP gave us these. They're like, we better not put any attributions. We'll just say authorities. So it's like, okay, maybe they'll end up giving them all to us. I know I've requested them specifically. We will see. So it talks about, it's showing some more snippets of what's coming up about Bryan, you know, getting in town, getting somehow maybe towards the King Road area. His phone starts bouncing off of. Now we see Chief Gary Jenkins, he's now retired, Pullman Police Department. And she's like, what is this internship that Bryan applied for? And he says it was actually part of Wazoo's criminal justice PhD program, that department. And she's like, how would you describe it? Or how would you describe Bryan? He was just a little bit awkward socially. Chief Jenkins did not feel Bryan could develop a rapport and trust with other employees. He didn't really speak in a fluid conversational tone. Didn't think he'd be a good fit for us. Now, again, I know some people will feel like me too. I'm not the world's best speaker. That's why I film these videos and like cut out a lot of my mistakes or just leave in some stuff. I'm like learning to get over it. You know, certain people, it does flow easier than others. So, of course, we should not disparage anyone who maybe stutters or doesn't speak well, or they have speaking issues. And of course, everyone should try as best as they can to improve their speaking, but we should also be patient with people. I'm not in any way saying anything about Chief Jenkins. I think what he really felt was like, oh, in his gut, there's something wrong with this guy. He won't fit in. Thank God. It would have been like the biggest mistake of his life. But I think we could see that a little bit with Bryan in terms of when he was stopped by that Latah County person not too far from the 1122 King Road house. He did have a certain halting way of speaking, but, you know, I could still understand him, except just for the audio recording, or even when he got stopped by that female officer. He spoke well enough there. I don't even know if it's necessarily the rhythm of his speaking. I think it's just his attitude. It's just this kind of know-it-all attitude, and of course we haven't seen the worst. We didn't see what those students saw, what they experienced with Bryan. But here's another one, Austin Morrison. He's also Bryan Kohberger's former student. So he's talking about how, of course, the university helps pay for tuition for teachers' assistants. So he was the TA for Austin's Criminal Justice 420 class, which was criminal procedures. He talks about Bryan was a little more strict with his grading and how he gave, you know, a whole bunch of feedback. He would say stuff like, okay, this is not descriptive enough, or, you know, how he treated the women differently than the men. And so the other student also talked about Bryan Kohberger's awkwardness, how he was a person who like didn't really look you in the eye and was just awkward. And I guess honestly, that personality might work a little bit better for maybe, not necessarily, maybe if you're doing something like this, maybe if you're more solo. I don't think necessarily that personality would work well as a teacher. I don't know. I feel like if you're a teacher in a classroom, you should just love people. You should, of course, love wanting to educate everyone. You should love teaching. You should love being fair to everyone. Your goal should be to help people learn, not to like disparage them and, you know, write all these mean comments and grade the women worse than the men. That doesn't make for a good teacher. He didn't really talk too much. He didn't really look the kids directly in the eye, and he didn't really look the students in the eye, which, I don't know, doesn't make for a great teacher in my opinion. They're talking about outside of class, his computer records, his very meager lack of contacts. Now, I know he just moved from Pennsylvania all the way to Washington, and maybe Bryan was trying to reset his life. Maybe he was like, okay, all these Pennsylvania contacts, these people, I'm getting away from them. So I can understand, was it a new phone? That's another question I have. Was it a brand new phone? Why did he have so few contacts? Was it because he was cutting people off in Pennsylvania and really turning his life over? Or was it just a true lack of friends? Was he like saying no, like he did to Josh? Did he say that to many well-intended people? But he only had 18 contacts in his phone. One person was labeled as maintenance, another person as AT&T. There were no texts to friends. They were just texts to his parents, and he called them mother and father. I wonder if he even texted his sisters. What kind of relationship did he have with his entire family? But he would say, for example, mother, where is father? And why isn't father answering me? It was all like mother this and father that. And I'm like, did he get that from the movie Psycho or what? Why was it so formal? There was hours of talking and texting with his mother and father. Just so formal. It's really strange. So at a certain point, I guess not long after he arrived, Bryan Kohberger started getting this bad reputation on campus. This one guy, Austin, is like, he remembers hearing the professor telling them, look, we're going to switch up the TAs, but they didn't give them details. They didn't say, of course, in the background, Brian's really getting a lot of complaints, 13 formal complaints. We got to get this guy away from you students. But he did have weird social problems, which we've read in some of the documents so far. People felt uncomfortable around him. We've heard about when he would follow people to their cars. He would talk some people's ears off, but in a know-it-all way. Not like, it doesn't sound like it was like, hey, I need a new friend, let's get to know each other. It sounds like it was in an annoying way. There was the complaint of how he was very controlling, he was manipulative, he treated, men a certain way and women a certain way, but obviously he wasn't too kind to the Korean man. Remember we went over, he was his office mate, and maybe that's why we saw Brian's name in Korean on the board. Yeah, I believe he was Korean, and I'm trying to remember his office mate, the woman, where she was from. But check my older video, I went over some of that. Bryan was pretty manipulative to men also, because remember, his office mate said he would kind of con him and take advantage of him, have him dump some of Brian's workload off on the guy. And which is bad, because the guy, he didn't totally understand English. He needed an interpreter in his interview with police. Like, Bryan should have been much more welcoming to people. These exchange students, they're coming to a foreign land, they're coming here. I feel like he should have been so much more welcoming. Instead, he's like trying to con this guy. He's being manipulative. Why? But teachers are like, look, remember the one teacher who gave that warning, like, look, if we don't get rid of this guy and he gets his PhD from here, he's going to be stalking women. It's going to be worse, that one exact quote we talked about before. So they put him on that performance improvement plan, and WSU was like firing him. They didn't want him back. So his life was spiraling out of control, 2020 talked about. And this was the creepy part. It's like Kohberger is about to turn his PhD work into like a real life thesis. Ugh, I hated that. So then they flip again to how they do their little maybe mid breakdown of what you're about to see about everyone finding out what happened November 13th, how Hunter Johnson told Hunter Chapin about his brother Ethan and Xana not being there anymore, and just the confusion and the grief. So they show a little bit of Greek Row. It's great. They're really boots on the ground, giving you an idea, even though the house isn't there anymore, just giving you an idea of the layout. Idaho campus, then there's Greek Row, Sigma Chi house across the street, and where the house was, the really popular, houses, it was kind of, they called it like a party neighborhood, not just, just the 1122 King Road is the bad party house. They didn't portray it that way. They were saying people passed down these houses from generation to generation. I could see that. Like if, someone's mom and dad or grandparents went to these colleges, however old they are, and then they maybe owned houses near there and they just tradition, pass them down, you get this experience, but Then came 2022 and all the girls there, everyone's full of optimism. They called that house the older girl's house, and Maddie stayed there. Kaylee moved in, Xana moved in, Bethany moved in, Dylan moved in, and the sixth housemate they called was Murphy, Kaylee's golden doodle. So they called it like a house dog. And so they gave a great rendition, this virtual view of the layout, since it is such a weird house. I mean, I listened to, was it on Nancy Grace's great interview with the Gonzalez's? Oh, excellent. Oh my goodness, all the stuff I learned, how the judge yelled at them for speaking to the press, all these inappropriate things that they've been through. So many of the victims' families have been through, whether it's because of the gag order, too many secrets, or what. Some stuff the families are just now learning. And the victims' families should have known some of this stuff a long time ago. In the middle of Party Central, the house itself is 3 levels. Christy talked about, this house being like the add-on from hell. So all these additions to this house, she was saying the way Bryan knew his way around that house, he had to have truly studied it. And in my opinion, perhaps he had been inside the house before. When we read through all those documents about how many times those girls came home with a door open, I was thinking, yeah, Bryan really knew his way around to do what he did so quickly and get out of that house. It doesn't sound like Dylan saw him wandering around like, where do I get out of here, But it's a great renditions. They show the door leading out to the porch is on the same level as Dylan's bedroom, Xana's bedroom, and Ethan often spending the night. And they talked about Kaylee and Maddie's bedrooms upstairs, Bethany in the basement, and then an empty room down there. I call it the basement. Technically, it's the first floor, but an empty room down there. Basically, they're saying, look, people don't really have a lot of interest in going into houses where they didn't know anybody. Now, this guy is calling it a party neighborhood in the sense that, you could walk around that area, and maybe that's how Bryan got attracted to the area overall. Maybe Bryan could have been cruising around and saw, oh, this is a popular area. This one guy, the one who was complaining about the YouTubers and TikTokers, he was saying, you could walk over to that area on a Friday and Saturday night and just see, see somebody like, okay, maybe there's a party there and someone invites you in. So maybe that's how Bryan, I wonder, found this neighborhood. Perhaps that's my speculation. And how Ava heard someone trying to get in her door in October? I'm wondering if Bryan was potentially making his way around King and Queen Road to see what would be my perfect, entry point. But we moved to Saturday, November 12th. So it's the last home game for the University of Idaho. The Vandals, everyone's celebrating. The tailgating is starting early. Josie is talking about tailgating. They had a lot of pre-games before the football game. If the game was early, Xana would usually be trying to wake them up, and Hunter is talking to. Xana would be like, oh, hurry up. And then they switched to Hunter. And then Ethan, I guess, asking Hunter, why aren't you here yet? What's going on? So he didn't want to keep them waiting any longer. They could go on the 3rd floor patio. They were showing, oh, it's a great house for selfies. I thought that was funny. But then it seems like they don't show the house when they're talking about, the selfies. I think some people kind of mix that up. But the patio was the scene of so many memories. They talk about, being with their whole friend group. It was normal, hanging out with their friends, just like any other night. Again, they assumed it would be like any other night. Bye, I love you. And that's when Maisie is like, I guess Ethan's date, because Maisie didn't have a date for this Betty's ball. And that's when she was like, bye. But her brother, Ethan, wanted her to stay out. And so she's like, I think he was like saying, look, dog, come on out, and all this stuff. It was really cute. Then they talked to Peter again, and they're switching back and forth between so many people. But Maisie is saying how much her brother was, saying, dog, come. He was like spam texting her, come on out. And Maisie was just like, I'm going to bed. And it was 9 o'clock, something relatively early. And then he said, love you. And she's like, I didn't even respond to that. And I hope she doesn't have any guilt over that. I hope she just takes in the blessing of hearing Ethan say, love you to her, and she was asleep. She didn't even get that text maybe until the next day. But the love you stood out to her because that's not something they normally texted. So they're going over Maddie and Kaylee's movements going to the food truck, the grub truck around 1:30. And then the one reporter calls it kind of like a sleepover. By the time the girls get back, Kaylee sleeps in Maddie's bed, just like they've done since they were kids. How cute. And Xana is ordering her DoorDash. It gets delivered to the King Road house. It says a little after 4 a.m., so I'm assuming he's correct. We know Molly, I believe, arrived at 3:59, but she had a hard time finding the house. So yeah, Lord knows when she actually put the food in front of the door. So Xana apparently took her food up to the kitchen, put some of her food on a plate. She's eating that in her bedroom. And then the next day, they're talking about Emily got a call from Dylan around 11 a.m. or so. And that's when things really started happening. So they kind of moved back a little bit to Bryan leaving his home around 3 a.m. or so, his apartment. And he headed towards Moscow. At some point, he turns his cell phone off. He's like circling that house. And he enters, they believe, through that sliding glass door on the back of the house. And Kaylee and Maddie were likely asleep, but they're thinking Xana was awake because they know, okay, she's had this DoorDash. There's steps from her watch they see she's taken. And then they have another good view of the sliding glass door and then how he would have gone straight up those stairs. Walked through the kitchen, went upstairs to the 3rd floor, found Kaylee, Maddie together asleep. Kaylee and Maddie, this is the part where he says, he probably, just ended their lives very quickly. I just hate that. And now that the parents are getting more details too about what Kaylee went through, I don't even want to get into details, but it's horrible. It's horrible. But I'm wondering if he headed straight up there. Did he truly know? Did he expect Maddie to be alone? That's what we don't know. Maybe. And Xana did hear this commotion. So Xana is such a hero to me. She probably heard something. Maybe she heard Bryan going up the stairs, the commotion or something. And most likely it was Xana who was running up, just to help her friends. And who knows what she saw at that point. And maybe she ran back down the stairs. Kohberger followed her, but in her doing that, I'm so grateful. She probably stopped him and made him forget to retrieve the knife sheath. So I think in that way, she is truly a hero. She truly risked her own life and limb to say, what is that noise? And let me run up there. What the heck are you guys doing up here? Of course, she didn't know it was some mass murderer. And of course, neither did any of the other roommates. After that, Xana had all these defensive wounds. I'm sure she was, she fought like hell, they said. I think Kaylee did too. And they believe that's the point when, maybe Bryan's struggling with Xana. She's fighting, a lot of defensive wounds. I don't know if Ethan ever woke up, but they believe that's the point when Bryan realized, wait, there's a 4th person here. Bryan realized, oh, there's a 4th person here. Ethan's in that bed. So he reaches over and basically ends Ethan's life. And then he finishes with Xana, is what investigators believe. I guess they've studied the scene and maybe tried to get, an order of things of how it happened. Xana ended up on the floor there. And that's when those surveillance cameras eventually catch him. This camera's only 50 feet from Xana's bedroom. That's why we can hear so much. We know that things were pushed around in Xana's room, and then Kohberger just walks out that sliding glass door, but of course he walks past Dylan first. And that's when Dylan thought she heard a man's voice saying, it's okay, I'm here to help you. I don't believe he said Kaylee's name, even though that's listed in the documents. I believe that's just, an error, the way in communication, the way it was written. But yeah, he's saying, I'm here to help you. And of course, Dylan doesn't know what she's hearing. She's thinking, oh, he's talking to Kaylee, but he's not saying that nicely. But it was really probably Bryan saying that to Xana in a weird way. We don't know how. A lot of people have a lot of excuses. I don't know what's true or not. I believe maybe Dylan really did hear him say that. Some people have gone and found some episode of Vampire Diaries and saying, oh, this character said, it's okay, I'm here to help you. They're thinking, oh, Dylan might have just heard that on Vampire Diaries. I don't know. But we know Dylan had opened her door a few times, and the third time was when she saw this guy with the black and the mask or whatever, baklava, and the bushy eyebrows walk past her and just leave her there, leave her alive. And she, on the body cam, we can see her saying, I just closed my door and locked it. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid. So she was afraid and confused. And Bryan, he was probably tired. Like, they talk about this type of form of taking someone's life can take a lot of energy. He had already fought, most likely with Kaylee and Horrible, and then what he did to Maddie, and then he gets interrupted by Xana, and he's chasing her down the stairs and getting into it with her, and then ending Ethan's life and finishing Xana, and then he's probably like, oh my goodness, all this time has gone by, and by that time he's like, oh, what do I do? You know, and maybe Dylan closed the door so quickly he couldn't get to her. I don't know, but he would have naturally assumed, uh-oh, the cops are on the way. So he's racing out of there and he's making it back home. But he was pretty awake and active just a few hours later. So it's not like he went home and fell asleep from exhaustion. If he was used to hiking and running a lot, he probably had a lot of endurance. Like, I don't really know how strong he was. And he even spent an hour, more than an hour and a half on the phone with his mom. And then he does the, thumbs up selfie. Then after 9 a.m., cops are saying, okay, he's on the move. He hasn't seen anything yet in the news. And I'm sure he probably didn't start Googling, oh, King Road or King Road killings. That would have really gave himself away. But he was probably scrolling through everything he could find to say, wait, why aren't people talking about, all the cops there on King Road? Maybe this is why he decided to go back in the area. We don't know for sure that he drove back past the house, but that's what they're thinking. His curiosity got to him. Maybe he didn't see anything anywhere on social media or in the mainstream media about what he did. So he went back, likely to the scene of the crime. He studied all these serial killers, but he made the one mistake. He left the knife sheath there. Now, was he literally going back to go get it? I doubt it. I mean, I doubt that he would have risked in the daylight, sneaking in the house again, going upstairs and trying to find it. I doubt he did all that. But Josie describes that morning too, how Emily and Hunter came. They were hanging out with her in her bedroom or whatever. Then Dylan called Emily. So that's why we have these three, these interviews that these main people will give. Hunter could overhear what was going on, and he's like, wait, Dylan sounds freaked out. Basically, he had a gut feeling. Many times it's good he followed his gut. I mean, that same, hours earlier, sometime in the middle of the night, we talked about Hunter had that gut feeling to just go lock his door. He felt like something was pulling him to do that, and he did it. That's really smart. So now he had a gut feeling I need to go over there, just go. So that's why he headed out. He was kind of, I believe, in the lead. And maybe all three of them may have just walked right in, it sounds like. But Hunter was the one already inside and had already gone up the stairs. That's why Hunter saw stuff first, and we don't know exactly what he saw, but he knew enough to say, uh-oh, something's wrong here. He even grabbed his own knife, but he told the girls, okay, just get out. And people are like, wait a minute, how could he say, just get out? But then we hear on the 911 call, oh, you hear him say, get out again. Well, I'm like, logically, the girls could have followed him in. Maybe they were still on the first floor. Maybe they were ascending the stairs even. But he's telling them, no, get out. Call 911. Dylan starts to call 911, and then he could still be saying, no, girls, get out. It's plausible to me that Hunter might have said, get out much more than once to the girls. And that's when, as soon as the cop gets there, initially they're just like, wait, where's this unconscious person? Because Hunter is just kind of saying, oh, someone passed out. I just know I need the cops. Someone passed out. He didn't want to freak everyone out with what he saw. So Lieutenant Darren Gilbertson is speaking again, but before that, once the cops come, you can hear the one Nunez say, look, looks like we've got a homicide, and be prepared. Basically, Officer Nunez saw two college-age people appearing to be both deceased, he talks about, And in the meantime, Emily's talking about they were just placed on the street to wait. They were cold and scared, and their brains were just like, ugh. And that's when Dylan starts describing what she saw and how she was screaming for Kaylee or calling people, whatever, and they weren't answering her. So the authorities said when they got there, that sliding glass door was left halfway open. And they asked, when you go into Xana's room, what did you see there? He's like, Xana was there. She was laying on the floor. Oh, and then they go through the hard part of how the parents found out. Hunter said he got woken up by his friend, so he must be talking about the other Hunter or someone else. I can't remember who woke him up. Hunter was the one who actually delivered the bad news to him. But his friend, Hunter Chapin's friend, was like, look, there's a bunch of cops over there at Xana's house. And he walked over, and that's where you could see him in like the pink hoodie just walking up. And the girls start crying like, oh no, there's Ethan's brother is coming. It's his brother. And Hunter is trying to describe, okay, Ethan and Xana are not here. He's trying to tell his brother, look, they're not here. And he finally goes, I think they were murdered last night. And of course that wouldn't want to register with this young person is like, and these people, they didn't know where Kaylee and Maddie were. Are they even in the house? I'm sure they knew because they would have seen the cars, but they didn't want to believe it. They might have thought, oh, could they be somewhere else? You hope against hope. But finally they learned. They got these vandal alerts and they got text messages knowing that all 4 people were gone. And they're like, that's the moment we knew where Maddie and Kaylee really were. And I do like that they said these 2 surviving roommates, Dylan and Bethany, have received a lot of criticism for not calling 911 immediately on the night of the murders. I like that they acknowledged the people hating on them. To me, I feel like it's unfair. Even if Dylan had called 911 immediately, okay, yeah, maybe they could have caught Kohberger sooner. Would it have saved anyone's life? Probably not. That's the word I hear from all these authorities. So I don't know, people with these far-fetched ideas that, oh, the surviving roommates were in on it, or they were there just like cleaning up their stashes and all this stuff. It's based on nothing. And heaven forbid if someone came into your house and did something to one of your loved ones or you or whatever, you don't know how another person's mind reacts. In an ideal world, this would have never happened. Like, just blame Kohberger for enacting something he shouldn't have enacted. So Bethany was telling Dylan, come down to my room. And that's when Dylan went down to her room. And I like this one guy. He's saying, look, we understand the disbelief that Dylan's going through. Basically, what 19-year-old kid is going to come up with and assume what actually happened was happening. And it's interesting, the one other FBI guy is saying the comforter is over the girls. I guess it's him. And he's saying, you take the comforter off. I always wondered, after Bryan did what he did he lay a comforter on top of them? Or had they already, like, when they were fighting, did they pull it over themselves? Or I always wondered that. But then they found a knife sheath. That's when they found it. They just say basically under Maddie's body. Because we've seen in the documents where it's like, oh, maybe it was under her shoulder. Maybe it was on this side. And people get really particular. And people are really particular about why haven't we seen photos of the sheath yet? I don't know. They didn't find the murder weapon, but they found the sheath. And that was their aha moment. They're like, oh boy, this sheath basically didn't belong in this house. And of course they talk about the messaging of police initially, like, don't worry. It was all this different messaging, and we see why it played out that way. The mayor was like, wait, why am I behind a microphone? The mayor initially was calling it a crime of passion. It was like, what does that mean? He didn't know. He's like, look, get someone with a badge behind a microphone. And that's when they're saying, okay, from the beginning, we called it a targeted attack, but basically don't worry. But then the Moscow residents were like, wait, you haven't caught the person who did it. How can we not worry? So they kind of changed their messaging. The investigation is growing rapidly. Of course, the press is all there. They're trying to get all the video footage. And I'm glad, Bryan drove his own Elantra because they caught that on camera circling the neighborhood. And they're like, wait a minute, why is this same car circling the neighborhood so often around the same time that the girls, the surviving roommates, think they might have heard something going on? when they were texting to check on their roommates. So it narrowed it down to the time that the crime likely occurred. So the search was on. Since that K-bar knife sheath was found under Maddie's body in the bed, it stood out. It stood out among everything else in that entire house. So it immediately stood out. And that's when they were like, okay, let's get this DNA, let's get this sheath to a lab, let's find out who it belongs to. And they found eventually the source male DNA. And there was no matches in the CODIS system for him because Bryan really hadn't been truly arrested. I mean, he had been arrested way back in the day, but it sounds like he didn't serve any jail time. There was not a lot of, like fingerprints or DNA or anything entered into the system for him as some kind of criminal way back then. But they had that DNA, and this is where they start talking with these experts. They flew that sheath down to Othram, and if you watch the interviews at CrimeCon with the Othram people, they're really informative. They are really clearing up some false assumptions where people are like, oh, it was just a little touch DNA, it was just a trace DNA, they don't really know. And he's like, no, it was much more than that. So Othram is some company, they build technology basically to bring certainty to crime cases. This is David Middleman, he's the CEO of Othram. So they really helped in this investigation. Forensic genetic genealogy is a tool they use to identify someone or find the nearest relative. And so this Kristen Middleman, she's the Chief Business Development Officer for Othram, I believe. That's David's wife, I'm assuming. That's his name, right, David? Yeah, I'm assuming that's his wife. And Kristen just did an interview on Brian Enton's channel, really good, with Stacy Chapin. And they're going to talk about at some point how they ran into each other. Kristen sounds like she's so great. She didn't, of course, break the gag order, but she ran into Stacy and I think she gave her a hug and she just kind of told her, basically, don't worry about it. We're working on the case. You'll be fine. So it says Kristen was adamant that we get these people the answers because Kristen is saying, I can't imagine, this being one of my kids and we have to help. So it was a sergeant on a plane in Boise, flew directly down to Texas. That DNA extract of Bryan Kohberger's contained a lot of DNA. This is where he says it again. It was not a trace amount. It was 500 times more DNA than we generally see in our low quantity DNA cases. And the technology at Othram was able to build the profile. They don't solve the case themselves. They really help solve it though, because they lead them to, okay, the person's likely in this family. So they build the profile, it's uploaded to genealogy databases, and it searches for people who are connected to that unknown DNA. I love this. I think this will help solve so many cases. So it led them to, in this particular Kohberger case, the relatives in Pennsylvania that they were looking for. And at the same time, everyone else is working to find Bryan. He's on his way in his white Hyundai Elantra all the way across the country to go home. It says on December 19th, the investigative genealogy team leader calls in and he says, hey, Darren, I got a first name for you. It's Bryan. And he goes, I got a last name for you. It's Kohberger. And basically, guess what? He drives a white Elantra. So they knew they had their man. They had to do, of course, more digging. He's in Pennsylvania. The digging, again, starts immediately. This is when the FBI guy says Bryan only left the house 3 times since he got there. So when did he get there? Mid-December, back in Pennsylvania. And then he only left the house 3 times? He was being very cautious. And the 3 times he left the house, he was wearing rubber gloves. So Bryan wasn't going many places. I mean, he had gotten there, December 15th. You think he would have been out more than 3 times. He had his car, but of course he didn't want that seen, I'm sure. And why is he wearing all these rubber gloves? Well, now we know why. So they pulled the trash. The agent on scene said, anything that makes contact with DNA. And they found the item in the trash, the male DNA, the Q-tips. And once they had the DNA, they had the DNA paternity match from the trash pull, from the Q-tip. And they knew they had the person, okay, the son of this guy. We have some positive ID matches. And that's where the warrant could be written. They had enough evidence. They had more than enough evidence at this point. They had Bryan, where he lived, his white Elantra. They traced the DNA. They had the knife sheath DNA. They had the knife sheath itself. They had so many things. So people who claim, oh, it's nothing, all they had was the DNA, they had so many things on Bryan. So it became a big story. They found him they're like, wait a minute, people in the Poconos are like, what? They're shocked. The FBI is talking about seeing the live feed, the armored trucks roll in, they make entry, and they get the call out, suspect in custody. So they had him. They had Bryan. Pennsylvania State Police, there's the helicopter, there were the armored vehicles, everything, like Olivia called it the Bearcat rolling in. This is when the FBI guy talks about agents from the Scranton FBI office interviewing Bryan's parents, and they were aghast. They had no idea. Even though there was a car like that, white Elantra, they knew Bryan was out at WSU. I'm sure they didn't know potentially, maybe, about all the trouble Bryan was having. Like when Bryan was on the phone with his parents or mom, dad, whomever, all that time, did he tell them all these issues he was having, like how much he was getting in trouble? Did he confess to his parents he was on an improvement plan? Maybe they knew nothing about it. Bryan could have been lying and manipulating and saying, oh yeah, I'm doing great out there, and then we'll head on back out there when the semester starts. But so they had that little conversation briefly, like, could it have been him? And they're like, no way it could be Bryan. So back to Bryan's reaction to getting arrested. He was very surprised, according to his lawyer, Jason. He didn't realize it would garner national media attention. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, really? And he was actually Bryan was asking his attorney, which outlets are actually, circling, which ones are covering this? So how could Bryan commit such a horrific crime for college students and not realize this is going to garner national attention? I thought that was his plan, How could he not realize? But that maybe shows either his manipulative, lying nature to even his lawyer, or just how obtuse he is, not realizing. Maybe he thought, okay, it'll really make it, coverage northwest side of the country up there. Maybe they'll talk about it, but, I'm all the way in Pennsylvania. Ha ha ha. I'm so far away from there, they'll never suspect me. I don't know what was going on in his head. But this is when they had the 2.5, 3-hour interview with Bryan, which I really hope we get to, hear one day. Even if it's a whole bunch of small talk, I still want to hear what he says. So Jason didn't get a lot of information about what that interview was about. Jason said he wanted to be limited in his knowledge. He wasn't going to be representing Bryan in this murder case, but he did know it would end up being a death penalty case. He predicted that, and he was trying to prepare Bryan for what was coming. Yeah, it sounds like, even though Bryan was a criminology major, it sounds like he didn't know a lot about what to expect. And remember when he put out that statement, I'm going to be completely exonerated, and he used the wrong term. It's just weird. Jason knew right away, yeah, this will be a death penalty case. Bryan Kohberger agreed to be extradited, so he went there to the Latah County Jail. Everybody over there was like, thank God he wasn't a local person. It wasn't one of us. But other people were like, who the heck is this guy? We don't even really know him. Of course, except for the people who had the displeasure of running into him at WSU. So they had somewhere in here talked about his Amazon searches and his purchases. They looked down at his cell phone. This was weird on Christmas Day. He hadn't been arrested yet, but he went to this serial killer website and just went down all these hyperlinked names. Like, was Bryan trying to see, oh, this is where I'll fit in. Where will I fit in among these? So since he was searching for serial killers and all these links on Christmas Day, no, mind you, well into the hours of December 26th, I think he spent hours doing this, he had not been caught yet, but he maybe naively assumed, I've gotten away with that Washington thing. Was he planning to commit something in Pennsylvania or go back to Washington and commit more crimes? I think he planned on being a serial killer, like he wanted to keep doing it. and he watched this Essence of a Psychopath, some kind of YouTube video about Ted Bundy, and he's got the hoodie on. That was December 27th. He watched that. It's on YouTube somewhere. And then what? Just 2 days later, he's taking a selfie the same way with the hoodie looking menacing. So facing forward, the hoodie pulled up. That's what he did on December 29th, only 2 days later. And he sent a picture of himself. And I'm like, who did he send that to? Or did he just take the picture? That's what I'm wondering. And they talk a little bit about other things they found on Bryan's phone, but they can't make the direct link to the Mad Greek where 2 of the victims worked. You know, they said something about the police gave them search terms to search, like, okay, let's search through all this massive data, see if he had any connections with the victims at all. And they did come across, okay, Bryan was presented the Mad Greek at some point. I have a hit for Mad Greek. It's the Moscow restaurant, it's closed now, where Maddie and Xana both worked. He had done some kind of search through Google Apps, but they can't definitively say Bryan, you know, he didn't necessarily search for Mad Greek. He might have searched for like restaurants near me or vegan restaurants near me, whatever. It doesn't necessarily draw a hard line to the victims in terms of connecting them, so they just can't confirm that. So then Bryan's back. You know, he's been extradited. He's in jail. He's insisting he's innocent for like almost 3 years. They're wasting taxpayers' money. Oh, vigorous defense. Meanwhile, this stupid gag order is still going on. So it gives 3 years worth of time for some people to build up this fan fiction story like, oh, Bryan couldn't have done this. They don't have any evidence. Meanwhile, it's just silence. When if they had been allowed to speak, I think it could have like tampered a lot of that initially. If they knew all this evidence from the beginning and could have, of course you don't spill your whole case, but you tell some good facts, salient facts where you're just like, okay, we know this. And then maybe it wouldn't have like left all the silence for people to just run rampant. So anyway, he ended up to change his guilty plea. And this is when Santa Claus, as they call Bill Thompson, they started talking about the plea deal came about, the death penalty was off the table. And Bill Thompson has the nerve to say, we got what we wanted. And what we got was, and that's when the reporter interrupts him and is like, wait, when you say we got what we wanted, though that we does not include a lot of the victims' families, some of them who have been very public about wanting more, perhaps a taped confession. You know, we don't feel you, we didn't feel you, we felt like you could have asked for a few more things. And then this is where Thompson says there was no legal way we could have compelled these. And quite frankly, there is nothing that we could have said that I think would have been credible or believable, that would have been even more damaging and frustrating to everybody, even the families of his victims. Now, I don't know if that is necessarily true. Like if they would have, okay, Bryan, you can do this plea deal, you can take the death penalty off the table. Like, was there truly no legal way to say, okay, you'll have to just tell us where you placed the knife? Or, you know, if you threw it in the Snake River, okay, then it's gone or whatever. Or tell us, yeah, your taped confession of what you claimed happened. And then even if Bryan Kohberger would have lied, if they would have never found the knife or any evidence of it, or if he would have given some crazy fan fiction story almost about what he did that night, it's still, to me, it wouldn't have hurt to ask. It's like Bill Thompson is saying, like they had no legal right or grounds to even ask. I don't think that's true. I don't know about the state's laws. I've seen many crime cases where, you know, they'll say, okay, they bring the perpetrator, they bring them literally out of the jail and they say, show me where you placed it. And sometimes those guys do play games with them. Maybe they take them on a wild goose chase and maybe they eventually show them like even the victims sometimes when they're looking still for the victim's remains or the murder weapon or what have you. I think they still could have asked. And then they could have said, okay, look, for the victims' families who wanted that, they could have said, look, we tried. This is what we did. We asked him if he's playing games, that's on him. But I was thinking to myself, even if he did start playing games, maybe he still could have leaked some truth. Some type of truth might have been leaked out. Maybe he would have like said whatever tale, but maybe it would have given them clues to perhaps even find more evidence. But so I don't know if they had no legal precedents or legal grounds to not do that, as Thompson's claiming, but they talk about all the victim impact statements and how Emily read Bethany's, and then Olivia gave her slam dunk. She just stared him down. She just didn't want to break eye contact, and I love it. She was saying, look, Maddie and Kaylee were not yours to stalk or study or to silence. And the whole time, that's when she said she wanted to reclaim their power, and she just would not break eye contact. And I love that she did that. And she basically got under his skin. And I'm not faulting other people who didn't show up or, felt like they wanted to be blocked and didn't want to stare at him. Everyone reacts in their own way. That's when she talked about how painfully average Bryan turned out to be. She called him dumb as they come. And she pretty much got everything out she wanted to say. She says, the gaze was intense. Want the truth? If you hadn't attacked them in their sleep in the middle of the night like a you-know-what, Kaylee would have kicked your effing ass. So that's towards the end. At the end, they talk about Stacy and Stacy Chapin and her chance meeting, with the Othram lady, and they hugged, and how the woman told her, we are working on everything. Everything will be okay. Everything's going to be okay. And they really held on to that, the outcome. And that was pretty much it. I mean, it was very, very well done. There were new things. Like I said, I noted all the new things. You guys know I've been covering this case so intently. 1 John 1 through 4, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our own eyes, which we have gazed upon and touched with our own hands. This is the word of life, and this is the life that was revealed. We have seen it and testified to it, and we proclaim to you the eternal life that was with the Father and was revealed to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us. And this fellowship of ours is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. We write these things so that our joy may be complete. So it was very well done. So I still plan to, Lord willing, if I can get back to reading all the entire documents, even as I cover other cases, because I want to be able to dive deeply, of course, into all the documents still, but also in there cover other cases as well. So we have a variety, a lot of things that need to be covered. Thank you so much for watching all this. Great, very well done, very, very well done, and for the people who were like, move on, I see different people are like, oh, why is another person doing this or nothing? ABC 2020 did a great job, and the families participating in this, the authorities participating in this, us getting new information, as long as the families want to participate in quality programming like this that explains more. They've been under a gag order all these years. I think it's very, very helpful. So my main thing is trying to understand why Kohberger did the things he did in order to prevent, again, the next Kohberger. I do feel sorry when anyone's bullied, and this should hopefully teach people don't bully other people. And also teach people too, even if you're bullied, we have to give all that to God, all those hurt feelings, and not seek revenge, or however Bryan just came up with it in his twisted mind. He overcame many things in Pennsylvania, and he ended up trimming down, and he came out west, but he just brought this horrible attitude with him. I just wish he could have found a way to speak to people kindly, to teach people correctly, to not stalk people and be all weird and look for all these weird things online. If he just would have been a good dude, I think he could have gone on and been fine. My thing is, when did he decide to turn into this diabolical character, exacting revenge on people who didn't even know him from Adam? That's my main question. Will we ever know that? Maybe. Like Steve Gonzalez says, he's all angry because he's like, yeah, now Bryan will go on and write a book or something with his old professor or something. Maybe he will do that. Anyway, let's just end this here, and I say my compliments definitely to ABC. It was a great job. And we'll see that next interview with Bethany. Let's see what else she has to say, and plus many other interviews we'll have coming. Hopefully we can hear them and see just more details. It's always good to hear from the horse's mouth, from the person who's literally being interviewed. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.